This is draft season. I am John Schmeelk, joined as always by Tony Pauline from sportskita.com. Draft season is brought to you by Moody's. Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. And Tony, a crazy weekend of college football. We'll talk
Oh,
about that. We will touch as well on how rookies so far are performing in the National Football League. We'll do the offensive rookies this week. We'll do the defensive rookies next week. And then by then, believe it or not, Tony, we're going to be almost to the end of October here,
yeah.
as we have almost 2 months of college football in the bank here. So it's moving quickly, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is we're taping this at 11 o'clock in the morning. The Mets' first pitch is until for another 6 hours. So there won't be any unintended interruptions in this podcast like there were last week.
Yeah, we did have a surprise in the National Football League this morning, though, with Robert Saleh getting looked by the Jets. I was
uh,
unfortunately at that Yankee game last night where they couldn't score a darn run. It was very frustrating, but it should be a fun show.
yeah, I don't know. Salah getting fired is a surprise. It which probably should have happened a while ago. We can get into that if you want to, but I guess I mean, so the worst situation was to be a top ranked, top 10 undefeated team in the SEC this
Yeah,
weekend because you went into the weekend with high hopes and you came out of the weekend basically watching your ranking drop because you now have a loss in your column.
yeah. I mean, this is going to be a mess with the college football playoff, Tony. We might not have an undefeated team left in the college football by the time we get to the end of the year here. We'll see what Ohio State ends up doing, but it's been crazy. And let's start. You don't have it on your list, but I want to start with it anyway. Vanderbilt. I still think those kids are carrying that goalpost around somewhere, the way they parade that thing through downtown. And Alabama's defense, like Jalen Milroe played well. You look at his
Yeah.
numbers, over 300 yards, high percentage throwing the football. But look, Vanderbilt, they played well early in the year. They pushed Georgia earlier in the year. But man, that is a heck of a win and a bit of a letdown game for the Crimson Tide coming off that big win against Georgia last week.
Beat Virginia Tech the first game of the year, and you said, "What the heck's going on here?" And like you said, I mean, Jalen Milroe, it was kind of the opposite of the Georgia game. They were very quiet in the first half, came alive in the second half. But as you mentioned, I mean, the Vanderbilt offense had its way with that Alabama defense. You wonder what's going on. I mean, Jerry Kill, the former coach at New Mexico State, he started at Minnesota, brought that Minnesota program back, went to Southern Illinois, guy that's had a lot of medical issues, coached the past couple of years at New Mexico State, revived that program. He's now at Vanderbilt, brought some of his talented players from New Mexico State with him. Just a terrific coach and really helped revive that Vanderbilt program. No one thought they were going to beat Alabama. No one thought the Vanderbilt offense, which is okay, would have their way with the Alabama defense, which has some talented players on it. But that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, look, Alabama's always got talented players on defense. Another SEC team, Tony, that was upset this week. Though Texas A&M's a good team. Missouri
Yeah.
getting knocked off by the Aggies, and we could talk about the game, but a bunch of prospects in this game to track as well.
Well, I mean, that was a game that I was looking forward to because of the prospects in the game, and it never was a game. I mean,
Yeah.
Texas A&M really took it to Missouri from the get-go. Connor Weigman, has been injured, comes into the game, 18 of 22, 276 yards, had a real solid game, great physical skills. He's got a lot of NFL potential. He's got to stay healthy, and he's got to improve his throwing mechanics and his accuracy. But basically, I think Weigman showed he's got that terrific potential in that Missouri game. Trey Zahn, the left tackle, a guy who I've watched since he was a redshirt freshman, only gave up one sack. Missouri had one sack. Zahn was terrific. They've got Missouri's got some draftable pass rushers off the edge there. Zahn really locked him down. And your guy, Nick Scarleton, really started to step it up. 3 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. He was the guy that had the one sack, was a real menace to that high-powered, explosive Missouri offense, which the Aggies shut down. So I think you saw a lot of real good pro prospects play on that Texas A&M side of the ball, and they really stepped up.
Yeah, you stole my fire on score, and it was good to see him get home. His numbers had not been off the chart so far this year. Good to see getting some of that production going. And then for Missouri, Luther Burden, nice little game, Tony. Not super explosive, but 7 catches, 82 yards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no deep passes, no game-breaking plays. They were able to contain him. Burden's a guy that scouts really like a lot. He's got a great build, very consistent. They estimate him to be a low 4.4, high 4.3 guy, but he plays much faster than that. And credit to the Aggie defense for a lot of catches, but no big-time game-breaking plays.
Wow, Burden's a pretty thick guy, Tony. He's big and strong. If he runs in the low 4.4s, that's a terror to tackle at the National Football League level. Oh man.
Like I said a couple of shows ago, if the draft were held right now, Luther Burden is the highest rated prospect on most teams' boards. Doesn't mean he's going to be the first player selected. But when you look at the grades, Burden's the number one rated prospect on a number of boards around the league.
And we'll get to another wide receiver when we talk about another game that had another big time game this weekend as well, Tony. Iowa, Ohio State. Iowa tried to Iowa up this game as much as they could in the first half. It was low scoring. I think it was just 7-0 at halftime in this game, right? And Iowa really tried to bog Ohio State down. They did a good job, but eventually Iowa just couldn't score, and the Ohio State offense made some plays.
The Ohio State defense really just stopped the Iowa offense cold. Jack Sawyer, who we had conversations about, I am much lower on Jack Sawyer than most people. 1.5 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, but he was a present throughout the game. He was getting pressure. He was breaking through the line of scrimmage. He was forcing the Iowa quarterback to move his feet, move out of the pocket. Sonny Styles is a guy to keep an eye on. Scouts have a late round grade on him. He was a safety last year, 6'4.5", 239 pounds, has moved to the natural position of linebacker, had 7 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. Really one of those, kind of lost art linebackers that is really good in space, really good in pursuit versus making plays as a pass rusher. Definitely a draftable player. And Donovan Jackson, the offensive guard from Ohio State. Donovan Jackson was a player who a year ago, prior to the 2023 season, some people were predicting he was going to be a first-round choice, but he had a terrible year in 2023. Made the right choice coming back to Ohio State this year. I'm sure he was lured back with a nice NIL package. We're starting to see the Donovan Jackson this year that we saw in 2022 when people, including scouts, were so high on him. He's a big mobile zone blocking lineman. He adjusts well on the blitz. He can get out to the second level and hit a moving target. But I think Donovan Jackson is showing he made the right choice going back for another year at Ohio State and has really improved his draft stock.
I want to ask you about one Iowa player, Tony. Their running back, Caleb Johnson, is super productive, really good college player. What are scouts saying about him?
Mid to late round guy. Those Iowa running backs, they're very hit and miss as far as pro prospects, more of a straight line type of guy. Like you said, real good college player, credit to him. But as far as projecting to the next level, you're looking at at best an early day 3 guy right now.
Ole Miss bounces back. They defeat South Carolina, but Jackson Dart just 14 of 27 in the game. Did have over 200 yards, but not very efficient.
No, but I mean, he didn't really have to be because like we saw with Texas A&M, like we saw with Ohio State, I mean, Mississippi took control of that game early on and never looked back. And we really saw Walter Nolan, the Texas A&M transfer, who a lot of people project could be a first-round choice, really stepped it up. He had 5 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, was unstoppable during the game. He's a big, powerful, athletic guy who is more than just a gap occupier. He makes plays on the football. He shows a lot of athleticism on the field, the ability to rush the passer and change direction. Walter Nolan really starting to kick it into gear and justify many of those first-round grades that people have put on him. Jared Ivey, another guy who kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Jared Ivey's like the weather. He's very inconsistent. 6'5.5", 283 pounds, a guy who's going to run in the mid-4.8s. When he's on his game, he is a dominant factor. 4 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks in that game against South Carolina. And if Jared Ivey could play to that level every game, you're talking about Jared Ivey potentially being a mid-round choice, if not a day 2 choice, but he doesn't always do it, which is why everyone's looking at him as late-round choice. One guy to keep an eye on, you mentioned Jackson Dart, Diego Pounds, the left tackle from Mississippi. He is a North Carolina transfer. The prior 2 years, he protected the blind side of Drake May. He's a terrific tackle prospect. I think he's more of a right tackle in the NFL. But I think I don't think that South Carolina had a single sack in this game, and he was going up against Kyle Kennard, the guy who destroyed LSU. Really made Will Campbell of LSU look foolish a couple of weeks ago. And Diego Pound's left tackle from Mississippi really shut him down. I have a potential late first round, early second round grade on Diego Pounds right now. Keep an eye on him. The one guy from South Carolina stood out was T.J. Sanders, the defensive tackle. 9 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. T.J. Sanders, when he is on his game, he is unstoppable. You go back, you watch the Georgia game from 2023. He's like Walter Nolan. He's not as big as Walter Nolan. He's a little bit taller, but he's very explosive, very athletic, quick, explosive interior lineman from South Carolina to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Tony, I think we're finally going to get a good defensive tackle draft here. I think we've had almost 2 or 3 consecutive drafts where we really haven't had a really good defensive tackle, or at least a plethora of them coming out in any of these classes. But early on in this draft, it looks like we're going to get a much better group of defensive tackles.
Yeah, it looks like it. And conversely, it's probably not going to be that good of an offensive tackle class. Some strength at the top, but not a lot of depth like we saw last year.
You know, Tony, I'm going to follow up on that. I was listening to Dane Brugler. We're going to have him on the show next couple of weeks. Friend of the program, comes on a lot of our stuff here at the Giants. And he says, talking to a lot of these teams in the NFL, that they like a lot of these offensive tackle prospects, but a lot of them see these tackles as potential guards at the next level. Yep. Are you hearing the same thing?
Well, it's funny you say that, because there's an article that's going to be released that I wrote on Sportskeeda. Hopefully it'll be up there by the time this podcast is released. And it's about Kelvin Banks. Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle.
He was one of them. Texas. He was one of them.
Well, and the problem with Kelvin Banks, from what I'm hearing, is he may not even measure 6'4". It's a Peter Skoronski type of situation. Well, Skoronski was more with the shorter arms. But I know teams, you watch Banks, he looks like a terrific left tackle every Saturday, but he may not have the metrics. He may not have the height to be a left tackle. So everyone that is projecting to be your top left tackle all of a sudden is now on a lot of guard boards. So I mean, you start off with Kelvin Banks. You go to the kid. I talked about Missouri before. Missouri has a terrific right tackle. I constantly butcher his name. Armand Membo. He's a terrific right tackle at Missouri. He's going to be a day 2 pick. 6'3", 314 pounds. He projects as a guard at the next level. So I would agree with it. And you start off at the top with Kelvin Banks.
Yeah, and I think people have even been a little disappointed with Will Campbell's year this year too, who people thought was going to be the top offensive tackle at LSU, right?
We talked about that against South Carolina, and I said about Will Campbell, the one thing that really concerned me, the one real red flag about Will Campbell, when I watched him over the summer, was he doesn't have a nasty attitude. Unlike Kelvin Banks, and I said this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, Campbell's more of a finesse tackle, right? He
doesn't really look to finish off the opponents. He doesn't look to bury the opponent. It's like he engages, and before the play is over, if he's blocked the guy, he kind of like gives up on the play. You don't see that nasty attitude, and you don't want. I mean, finesse tackles kind of went by the wayside, as did running backs being selected in the first 10 picks. And Campbell's a talented guy. He's just somebody's got a lot of fire underneath.
All right, one other SEC team, as you mentioned, Tony, that was undefeated, and no more. Tennessee upset by Arkansas in this game.
Andrew Armstrong, a guy that nobody talks about, 9 receptions for 132 yards. He's not a fast guy. He's a taller possession receiver with incredibly reliable hands, runs good routes. I have a 6th-round grade on him right now. Most scouts feel he's undraftable. He's not going to work. He's not going to run in the 4.4s, but he is a real good pass catcher, and did the 9 receptions for 132 yards against a very good Tennessee defense. Landon Jackson didn't have great stats, but he was a nuisance all night. He's a guy who penetrates the line of scrimmage. He's a guy who disrupts plays, makes the quarterback move his feet, makes the quarterback move around this pocket. People continue to ask me, I don't think Landon Jackson's a 1st-round pick. I think he's more of a day 2 guy, but he's a good defensive end in a 4-man front. Eric Gregory, their interior defensive tackle, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, a big, explosive, one-gap type of defensive tackle. talked about we talked about Walter Nolan. We talked about T.J. Sanders of South Carolina. He kind of fits that mold. Eric Gregory, James Pierce, who really hasn't had a good year, kind of seems to come to life. 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. You talk to people. The concern with James Pierce, who some people thought could be the top pick of the draft, if not a top 5 pick, he's just a really tall, thin guy. There's not much bulk there to him. And he's able to make the plays on Saturday because, he's so athletic and he's so quick, but the lack of bulk has concerned some people.
One asked about one other Tennessee player. I don't think we've talked about him yet. We've mentioned now it's going to be a better defensive tackle class. I think this is going to end up becoming a really good running back class too, Tony. What are your thoughts on Dylan Sampson, the Tennessee running back? He's been very productive this year, even in the loss. 138 yards on 22 carries. He now has 12 touchdowns on the year, averaging 6.5 yards a pop, 587 yards on the ground. What are scouts saying about him?
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee always finds a way to put productive backs on the football field, and then they become, mid first round picks, if not early second round, late day 2 picks, or early third round picks. We saw it last year with the Wright kid, right? I mean, yeah. No one was really talking about him before the season. He's just exploded throughout the season, and he's a home run hitter. Kind of fits that mold. 3rd round, maybe 4th round. Got to see some more of him. Got to see him catch the ball out of the backfield. But, it's basically with him, it's the beginning stages of scouting him. Good showing so far, but we got to see more of it.
Yeah, just 5 receptions so far this year, Tony. You mentioned him trying to do more out of the backfield.
Well, the Wright kid last year, I don't think had that many receptions either. He was a good pass catcher, but they just never threw him the football.
Yeah, I think that's that, old, Art Briles system. They just don't throw to the running backs a whole lot in that system. Final game you want to touch on, Tony, was Texas Tech in Arizona. Teteroa McMillan, another awesome game. 8 catches, 161 yards. The guy just continues to produce. What else from the game caught your eye?
Well, I wanted to watch it because it was McMillan for Arizona against Josh Kelly, the receiver from Texas Tech by way of Washington State, who nobody talks about. Josh Kelly's sort of a lot like the Andrew Armstrong of Arkansas, who I mentioned. Nobody talks about him, not super fast, but just a real good pass catcher. Fundamentally sound catching the ball with his hands away from his frame. Good route runner. Had 5 receptions for all of 27 yards, but this year, 44 receptions for 517 yards in 6 games. Had big performances against Cincinnati and Arizona State. Was basically overshadowed by McMillan, who I believe is going to be a top 5 pick. The guy is just a phenomenal receiver. But Kelly had a lot of catches for not a lot of yards in that game, but he's a guy that can keep him on in day 3.
Draft season is presented by Moody's, and Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risks into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. Well, the 2024 rookie class, Tony, is trying to turn some opportunities into production this year, and we've had some real standouts. So let's go position by position. We'll do offense today, Tony. We'll hit defense next week. Let's start at quarterback, and I'm not going to say I'm going to take an L on this because I had him as a top 10 player. He was an elite quarterback prospect to me, but Jaden Daniels has been even better than I thought he was going to be. 77% completions. It came down to earth a little bit this week against Cleveland. 1,100 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, 300 rushing yards already. He has been sacked 14 times, which is a lot. That was one of the worries I had about him coming out in terms of pressure sack ratio in college. But this is what impressed me the most. The first 2 weeks, he put up great numbers, but he threw so many passes behind the line of scrimmage. Everything was short, wide receiver screens, things like that. The last 2 weeks, he's gone downfield a lot more, Tony. He's starting to throw the ball after he scrambles rather than just running it after he scrambles. I think we've seen some real progress from him. I still think it's going to come down to earth a little bit. I've been critical of Cliff Kingsbury. I think he's done a great job designing this offense for him. A lot of easy opportunities, getting guys open. But just, a really good start to Jaden Daniels' young career.
Yeah, an incredible start. I mean, listen, I'd gone on record saying that I thought that Jaden Daniels was going to be the best quarterback to come from the 2024 quarterback class.
You were all over him, man. You were all over Jaden Daniels. You had him tabbed.
I didn't think it would come this quickly. Now you mentioned the sacks, partially Jaden Daniels' fault, partially the fault that Washington offensive line is a disaster.
Oh, absolutely.
They have the kid from TCU who they're trying to work in at left tackle. He's played incredibly well. I think that it's as much a part of the change of culture in Washington. And I wrote 2 articles about this at Sportskeeda, with Josh Harris taking over that franchise, putting the right people in place, as much as it is Jaden Daniels. And I think one is going to help the other, which will eventually help the other. And what I mean is that culture, that winning culture that they put in place, has really helped Jaden Daniels basically perform beyond expectations. And as he's performing beyond expectations, that's just going to help, the franchise more and more, who is now, in a competitive position to win the NFC East. I don't think it's going to happen. I do think that Daniels will eventually come back down to earth, but it's been a phenomenal start for him. And I mean, basically, this is just a continuation of what we've seen really since the second half of his 2022 season, because he just gets better and better and better. And, good for him and good for the Commanders.
This reminds me a lot, Tony, of how Robert Griffin III arrived there and was just absolutely dynamite in his rookie year. Now, hopefully, obviously, he stays healthy, dual threat quarterback and all that stuff. But yeah, he's been just fantastic. And all the teams in the NFC East, including the one who's building him in right now, is going to have to deal with that guy for a very long time. Again, assuming he stays healthy, which hopefully he does. Caleb Williams, the first overall pick, Tony. A lot of people were panicking the first couple of weeks with him, which, people are stupid. But he's really played better the last couple of weeks. 21 of 32, 318 yards, 2 touchdowns in this week's game. And you're seeing things start to slow down for him at the NFL level. And he, by the way, he isn't getting great protection either in front of that Bears offensive line. But he's starting to put things together a little bit for Chicago.
Which is ironic, because everybody wondered whether they're going to use that second pick on an offensive lineman, on an offensive left tackle.
Yeah.
And the thing is this, he's just got to learn to more and more play from the pocket, see the field from the pocket, because those off-platform throws, those improvisations are not going to be as easily accomplished on Sunday as they were on Saturday.
You need them, but use them in spots. That can only be an occasional weapon for you. It can't be your go-to thing.
As he learns and gets more comfortable playing from the pocket, more importantly, seeing the field and realizing what's happening around him, things are going to come more easily for him. I mean, you can't, you're right about that. I mean, go back to a story where, and this, I mean, 3 weeks into the 2018 season, everyone was saying the Giants made a mistake not taking Sam Darnold over Saquon Barkley. That really didn't work out too well. So, yeah, long way to go for both Jaden Daniels, who looks fantastic, and Caleb Williams, who struggled early in his rookie career.
How about Bo Nix? What have you seen from him so far?
The team is winning. Everyone is happy. I am not overly impressed with Bo Nix. I think I see the same thing from Bo Nix now that I saw coming in through the whole process. He's smart. He sees the field. But I don't think he's much more than a game manager. Now, that being the case, when you have a defense like the Denver Broncos defense, and that is a nasty, explosive, in-your-face, game-changing defense, you can win with a game manager. So I think that he's being helped along by how well the defense is playing. But again, I go back to my concerns about Bo Nix, just not the downfield arm of the Jaden Daniels, of the Caleb Williams, more of a game manager. And, they're going to have to develop a system around him to play to his strengths.
No, I agree. And then the 2 other top 15, I guess, quarterbacks. Well, I guess they're top 10 quarterbacks, right? Michael Penix has not played yet. The way Kirk Cousins played last Thursday night, that might be a little while before he takes the field. Kirk Cousins, 500 yards, unbelievable in that Thursday night victory. And then, of course, Drake May. There's some clamoring up there, Tony. I think people are getting impatient. People are worrying, but I think the Patriots are doing the 100% right thing by holding him back. And not because, look, Drake May might be ready. I'm not there. I'm not watching practice. I don't know the answer to that question. But if they put him behind that offensive line, that poor kid is going to get destroyed, and he's not equipped to handle that.
I could not agree with you. I mean, I think Gerard Mayo has done a good job in a bad situation there in New England. They're not a good team. They don't have a lot of talent. Why put Drake May in there to get him pummeled? Why put him in there and maybe get him injured? Why put him in there so he's basically running for his life every single down? I mean, they don't have a good offensive line, and the offensive linemen that are good have been injured, and some of them are lost for the season. I just see, no benefit. As much as the fans want to see Drake May in it, Drake May's not going to turn the season around for the New England Patriots. And there's probably at this point in juncture more bad than good that's going to happen if you start Drake May. Now, if they want to feed him into the lineup late in the game, absolutely understand it. I think that's a good way to do it. But Drake May is not going to change the fortunes of the New England Patriots behind that offensive line. Feed them in a little bit at a time, see what happens. And again, I wrote an article about this about 2 weeks ago at Sportskeeda. I agree with what they're doing with him up there by sitting him. You know, the fans are going to be impatient. They're used to winning up there. It's the best thing. You talk about Atlanta. I mean, the way Kirk Cousins played, not just last Thursday, but really through the entire season, makes that questionable pick of Michael Penix seem even all the more questionable. And then J.J. McCarthy with the season-ending surgery. And lo and behold, here comes Sam Darnold, the guy that the Jets thought they were getting back in 2018 or 2009, whatever it was. Hasn't lost a game this year. It looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I think that has a lot to do with the coaching he's receiving at Minnesota, because O'Connell's fantastic.
Yeah, he's a heck of a coach, Tony, no doubt about it. And by the way, I thought the Jets defense actually did a really good job against Darnold in that game in London. I thought they had those wide receivers covered really well. He did miss a couple throws down the field, but I'll just get on my soapbox as we talk about these rookie quarterbacks that are in the league, the guys that are going to come out next year. That's going to be a lot of our conversations over the next 5 or 6 months, Tony. People love the quarterbacks. Please be patient, okay? Right. You draft these guys to be your franchise quarterback for 10 and now, Tony, 15, 20 seasons, depending how young these guys are. Quarterbacks are playing into their 40s now. Please don't give up on a guy after 3 games. It took Baker Mayfield 3 teams. I take that back. Was it 4 teams for him? No, it was 3 to figure this out and become a good player. Sam Darnold is on team number 4 to become a good player. Daniel Jones finally has some protection in front of him. He's been really good the last 3 or 4 weeks. And then I'm missing one guy. Who's the 4? Geno Smith. It took him till his 30s to figure it out in the National Football League. Now he is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFC. So the situation around the quarterback is hugely important, and making too many early judgments on a position that is the most difficult to play in all of sports. Everyone needs to slow their roll when they talk about young quarterbacks. And
it's like, it's microwave. It's the microwave society. Bill Parcells, who was a great coach, used to say it takes 3 years to determine whether a player is an NFL player from the time you draft him. People want the answers now in 3 weeks. They don't want to wait 3 months. They sure as heck don't want to wait 3 years. They want the answer in 3 weeks. And it's insane at any position, especially the quarterback position. And you look, I mean, who's the best quarterback in the NFL right now? Patrick Mahomes. What did Patrick Mahomes do his rookie year? Sat on the bench, and he sat and he was put there by one of the best quarterback developers, best quarterback coaches that we have seen the past 25 plus years in Andy Reid. So, yeah, you've got to be patient with him.
Yeah, Jordan Love, same deal in Green Bay, right? Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers, he's now developed. I mean, if you asked Jordan Love, Tony, to play in his first 2 years, he would have looked awful, and people would have been bailing on him left and right. He wasn't ready. He didn't have that type of college experience, and that's fine. Handle these guys the right way, and it'll pay you back later.
And the whole irony of the J.J. McCarthy injury is it could be the best thing for him and the franchise, because now, they're winning with Sam Darnold. It's a good situation to have, and J.J. McCarthy can just sit there and observe and learn.
Absolutely. And look, they can even bring Sam back for one more year if they want. We'll see how the season goes, but that's something they can kind of figure out down the road. All right, let's go to running back, Tony. We knew this wasn't the best running back class. We didn't have a running back go until late in the second round in last year's draft, and I guess they've played to form because no one's been great. No one, I believe, I didn't look at Bucky Irving's totals. I don't believe anyone has more than 200 yards rushing through 5 weeks from this running back group. Who's jumped out to you?
Well, you got to look at Irving's numbers, because he is the one guy that's got.
Is he over 200? Darn.
More than 244 attempts, 247 yards, 8 receptions. The thing with Bucky Irving is, he was a terrific back at Oregon. He was a guy who was creative. He was a guy who ran hard on the inside. He was a good pass catcher out of the backfield, but he was small and he tested horrendously
Yeah, Tony,
before the
that's the
draft.
thing. Like, teams are not going to draft a guy high if he's small and slow. You can be
Right.
one of the two. You can't be both.
And that's what everyone, which is why he fell. But when you looked at the tape, I mean, I had him as one of the better backs. I had him, I think, as my third back because the tape for 2 years just jumped out at you. But he didn't meet those metrics. Goes to Tampa Bay, is being used in a rotational system, which is best for him.
Yep.
And he's been incredibly productive. Another guy who didn't test well and is really having a good year is Braylon Allen of the New York Jets. Here's a guy who was 235 pounds at the combine, didn't run the 40, didn't run the shuttle, didn't run the 3-cone, had a 32-inch vertical jump, had a 9-inch broad jump. So he's 235 pounds. He doesn't test well, and he's coming off a poor season. If you look at Braylon Allen at Wisconsin, his freshman season was his best season, and then the next two were, very uninspired. Now, granted, it was a different sort of situation with Luke Fickell there his last year at Wisconsin. But the Jets take him in the fourth round, which raised some eyebrows. And Braylon Allen has been terrific. I mean, and that basically rotating with Breece Hall, taking carries away from Breece Hall, 32 yards, 32 carries, 143 yards, 8 receptions. And the thing about Braylon Allen, when you watch him, he's not just a downhill grinder. He's not just somebody who runs over defenders. He shows terrific short area quickness. He shows the ability to make defenders miss, shows the ability to create yardage. So, again, Bucky Irvin was small and slow. Braylon Allen was a little bit too big and didn't work out and looked out of shape. But both of these guys have really found their gear, especially Braylon Allen. Bucky Irvin had a couple of years of really good tape. Braylon Allen was disappointing, but put in a good system, and he's doing a great job for a New York Jets team that you really think didn't need another running back with Breece Hall there.
Yeah, and then two of the backs I want to touch on, Tony. One was Carson Steele.
Yeah.
He had a chance, and he was productive, but he has 3 fumbles, and now Kareem Hunt is now the starting running back in Kansas City, and I think Pacheco should be back in the next couple of weeks. And then Tyrone Tracy. Devin Singletary hurt his groin. We talked about him a lot on last year's draft season shows. Converted running back we converted 2 running back from wide receiver. Had some great tackle breaking ability. He had a coming out party for the Giants this past weekend against the Seahawks. 18 carries, 129 yards, 4 runs of 10 or more yards. Very explosive.
And the thing about Tyrone Tracy is a year ago, he really wasn't even on the scouting radar. He wasn't graded over the summer prior to his senior year at Purdue by scouts. Really had a nice season. We saw him at the Shrine Bowl. You thought about Tyrone Tracy as a late round pick, which he was, as a situational third down type back who maybe could return some punts for you. But now the situation has forced Tyrone Tracy into, the main role there. And he's responded early on. He's got he's got a solid build. He's smart. He's got terrific vision, good foot quickness. So I mean, let's see what happens here. I don't know that he's going to be a feature ball carrier, but it looks like the Giants may have come out with a real good number 2 ball carrier in the late rounds. As far as Carson Steele is concerned, yeah, he's got to really if he keeps fumbling the ball, they're going to cut him. But it's still a great story. He goes from what was it, Ball State to UCLA, undrafted. They liked him so much they tried to manufacture ways to get him on the field, and he was productive. That whole thing where he missed his sister's wedding because he was starting the game 2 weeks ago, but he's got to hold on to the football. Regardless, it's a good story. He's a talented back. He wasn't when he played in the MAC. He was good back at UCLA, although he was more of a situational back. No reason to think he can't have a successful NFL career.
Draft season is brought to you by Moody's. Moody's is a proud sponsor of the Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. All right, let's go to the wide receivers here, Tony. And even though he did not play this week due to a concussion, Malik Neighbors heading into week 5 led the NFL in both receptions and targets. We knew he'd be a focus of this offense heading into the year. Brian Daboll wants to get the ball in his hands of his playmakers. And everything that he showed on tape in college, he has showed at the National Football League level. And maybe even some more contested catch stuff that we've seen at the NFL level that he didn't show in college. So just a dynamite start for the 6th overall pick from last year's draft.
Should be no surprise. I mean, as we say time and time again, LSU receivers are good in college and they turn out to be better pros. And that's what Malik Neighbors was. And, compare him to Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison was the bigger contested pass guy, where Malik Neighbors was more explosive. He was quicker. He was more prone to the big play. He was better running after the catch. It was just a matter of what you wanted. And how ironic is it, as Malik Neighbors is tearing it up for the New York Giants, Jaden Daniels, his college quarterback the past 2 years, is tearing it up for the Washington Commanders. I mean, this is an extension of his college career. He has these abilities. Good for the Giants for showcasing that. Hopefully he gets back on the field and is able to stay healthy for the rest of the season. But a guy who's got special talents and has really shown that ability in the early part of the season.
And Tony, their teammate, Brian Thomas, tearing it up for the Jacksonville Jaguars at an 80-yard touchdown reception this past week. Again, once he gets behind you, you ain't catching him. 22 catches, 397 yards, 3 touchdowns for Brian Thomas Jr. I thought maybe it would take him a little while, that he was a little bit raw, but the physical skills have jumped out early, and he has been probably the second best rookie wide receiver out there.
Well, I mean, I think he did start slow, and he's really starting to pick it up and kick it into gear like that Jacksonville offense is. I mean, it's no coincidence that Jacksonville started slow, Thomas started a little bit slow, and now they're starting to put lots up on the board. They got to stop points, and Thomas is really kicking it into gear. I like Thomas all along. I mean, I thought he was not that far behind the top 3 receivers from last year's draft: Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. It was just that he was overshadowed at LSU by the big playability, by the explosiveness of Malik Neighbors. So this doesn't surprise me. He's just got to pick it up a notch and really show that he can be that man every Sunday in Jacksonville.
Compared to Thomas and Neighbors, Rome Odunze and Marvin Harrison are off to, quote, this is me doing fake quote marks, slow starts. But really, Harrison's 17 for 229, 4 touchdowns. It's pretty good. Odunze 15, 206 and a touchdown. Not bad, given he has 2 other good receivers on the roster with him. So I think those guys, even though they haven't blown the doors off people like Thomas and Neighbors have, pretty solid starts to their NFL careers too.
Odunze's been kind of spotty, but let's go back to what we said about Caleb Williams. I mean, he struggled the first couple of weeks, so it's probably not a coincidence that Odunze is going to struggle the first couple of weeks, right? Same thing with Marvin Harrison. I mean, Marvin Harrison will be productive when Kyler Murray's productive, when Kyler Murray's on his game. Not as good as Malik Neighbors, not as good as Brian Thomas. I mean, it's been a little bit up and down for both of those receivers, but so has their respective offenses and the respective quarterbacks.
Hasn't been up or down for Brock Bowers. That guy's been fantastic.
Oh. Unreal. And I mean, you talk about a guy who's playing with 4 quarterbacks or has 4 quarterback plays, 28 receptions for 313 yards in 5 games. He's on pace for 90 receptions this year. So, you could see why the LA Rams wanted to trade up to get him. You could see why the Indianapolis Colts wanted to trade up and get him. You may want to ask at this point in time, why didn't the New York Jets take him when they had the chance to? But Brock Bowers, like Malik Neighbors, his Sunday play is just an extension of what we saw on Saturday at Georgia.
Just a couple guys I want to mention. Ladd McConkey, 15, 176, 2 touchdowns. The Chargers don't throw the ball a lot. You look at Justin Herbert's numbers, you're not going to have a big-time wide receiver with huge numbers in that offense. Xavier Worthy's caught some deep passes. He hasn't done much more than that, Tony, so far. And then I should have mentioned when we finished the running backs, some of the highest drafted running backs, Jonathan Brooks hasn't even come off of the injured list yet. Trey Benson barely plays. He's almost the 3rd back in Arizona. Jalen Wright, despite all the injuries in Miami, he hasn't gotten much of an opportunity. Marshawn Lloyd's been hurt. Ray Davis is stuck behind James Cook. Blake Corum stuck behind Kyron Williams. Will Shipley stuck behind Saquon Barkley. You just haven't had a lot of opportunities for some of these other guys.
And the kid from Notre Dame, Audric Stillman, has done nothing. I mean, but that's why, we knew that these guys weren't going to be highly drafted, and they didn't. I think Allen was a 2nd-round pick. Everybody else came off the board starting in the 3rd round. And why we had said all throughout the process leading up to the 2024 draft, these guys were rotational backs. They weren't featured number one ball carriers, and it's coming to fruition as we see.
Yeah, we'll see. Brooks might have a chance to be that guy for Carolina when he comes off the injured list. They're taking their time with him during the
As
draft
they
process.
should.
Everyone said
There's no reason to rush him on the field with that team.
correct. Everyone said he'd be ready in week 1, but again, we talked about how well Patriots are handling Drake May. Good job by the Panthers, not trying to rush that kid onto the field. Make sure he's 100% first and ready to go. All right, let's talk about the big guys up front, the offensive linemen, Tony. We got to give these guys some love. Let's start at tackle first, and then we'll talk about some of the interior guys, all right? It's a really tough position to come out of college and play tackle right away. The level of pass rusher you have to go up against is unbelievable. You get widened out a little bit more, but Joe Alt, J.C. Latham, Talisi Fuanga, to a little bit of a lesser extent, they've come out and they've started their careers pretty strongly.
What really impresses me about Latham and Fuaga is, I mean, these were guys who Fuaga was a right tackle at Oregon State. Yeah. Latham, we didn't know whether he could play left tackle in the NFL. And both of these guys are really doing a bang-up job at the all-important left tackle position.
And by the way, Joe Alt changed positions too. He went from left tackle to right tackle.
Exactly. You can throw that in the mix as well. I think the left tackle, and good point. But I think that Latham's play and Fuaga's play at left tackle has really, really impressed me because personally, I thought that they were going to be right tackles in the NFL. As I thought that Alt would be a right tackle. I thought he'd be better off at right tackle, and they didn't need him to play left tackle out there with the Chargers. And despite the fact that Malik Neighbors is having a great year, despite the fact that Brock Bowers is having a great year, I think the Chargers made the right choice passing up on those guys and going with Joe Alt because he's proven. I mean, you talk to people who've seen him in person. He's a massive man who's an incredible athlete who, has basically locked down that right tackle position. He's going to be there for a while. And we know how important offensive linemen are to Jim Harbaugh. He basically looks at the offensive linemen as weapons in the offense.
No question. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this, let's have patience with some of these other offensive tackles that maybe aren't starting their careers the best way. You have Fautanu, by the way, who got hurt. He's not playing right now. Then you have Olufashinu, who had to step in due to the injury to Morgan Moses. He has had some issues early in his career, but again, a very tough position to play. Amarius Mims has had more injury issues with the Bengals at right tackle, so we'll keep an eye on him. Tyler Guyton. Poor kid had to play his first NFL game against Myles Garrett at left tackle. Good luck, man. That guy, Myles Garrett kills everybody. And then Kingsley Suamataia, who we talked about, a lot of physical ability, Tony, but a project. He had a slow start to his career, and he's been pulled as a starting left tackle for the Chiefs.
A project and a guy that's a bit immature, which you can't be. And he had every opportunity. I mean, I was jumping for joy when I saw that they were going to give him a chance and even start him at left tackle because I love his ability.
Yeah.
But as we talked about, there's a bit of immaturity. As far as Fashanu is concerned, his struggles really don't surprise me because it's the opposite of Fuega. It's the opposite of Latham. The thing with Fashanu is he's a terrific pass-blocking left tackle. Great footwork, athleticism, mobility. The run-blocking strength was always an issue. Now you push him over to right tackle, and, it's been up and down for him. Doesn't surprise me. And it's it's a different than you talk about Joe Alt, but I thought Joe Alt was a natural right tackle. I never imagined Fashanu as being a right tackle. So until he gets back to his natural left tackle spot, I'm not gonna rag on the guy.
No, absolutely not. All right, let's talk about some of the interior guys here, Tony. For the Steelers, Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick, they've teamed up. They've done a really good job. McCormick at guard, Frazier at center. And then Cooper Beebe's been the Cowboys starting center. Guy didn't take a snap at center in college, goes in there, starts at center. You don't have any 330-pound centers in the National Football League these days, Tony, but he's done a really nice job for them inside. And then Dominic Pooney, who slid in starting right guard for the 49ers. He was a tackle at Kansas. He's done a really nice job. So those are some of the interior guys that I really think have really stood out.
Well, I think it starts and ends with Zach Frazier. I mean, Zach Frazier has played on a level that's almost elite. I mean, he stepped right in there. He took over that spot, and he's drawing praise from everybody. I mean, there are people think that he's going to be the next great center for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they have had a litany of great players at that position. And Zach Frazier, the late second round pick, I mean, he is turning into one of the better picks of the draft in the when you look at the early part of the season. That's how good Frazier has been. Beebe, I mean, there were concerns about him with the short arms. You got to like the transition to tackle. I think Graham Barton has also done a solid job
That's a good one.
with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tyler Guyton struggles really. I don't want to say they really don't surprise me because Tyler Guyton, as we saw at Oklahoma, he was up and down, lost his starting job. Was he a left tackle? Was he a right tackle? He was phenomenal when we saw him at the Senior Bowl, which I think really restored his draft stock and really pushed him or solidified him as a first round pick. But he's a guy who, we talk about Will Campbell, the up and down, the guy who doesn't always play with the fire. That's Tyler Guyton. Great potential. I mean, he's got the potential to be that left tackle at that spot for years to come, but he's got to apply himself every down.
Yeah, look, he was a little raw too, like his hand placement and things like that.
Right.
There was a lot of stuff that he had to work on. And starting left tackle day one, and the Cowboys are 3-2 just to beat the Steelers in a really tough game on Sunday Night Football. So, Tony, it's been fun watching this. I don't throw Tanner Bortolini, by the way. He's gotten some playing time inside, and I think he's actually had a pretty good start. He was that very mobile center, and he was fun to watch it working at the combine. We saw him at the Senior Bowl too, I believe, Tony, and he was a fun player to watch during the draft process. I think he's played pretty well. Any other rookies that you want to kind of shout out here before we say goodbye?
Bo Limmer as a day 3 pick is moving into the starting lineup. Layden Robinson, the day 2 pick, is moving into the starting lineup. And listen, we knew going into the 2024 draft it was going to be offensive line heavy.
Yeah.
And we're reaping those rewards, if you will, because not only the guys at the top end of the draft, but the day 3 guys and a lot of the day 2 guys are really performing well as starters in their rookie year.
Yeah, and you mentioned Brandon Coleman earlier in the show. They've been trying to slide him in left tackle for the Commanders, and he's done a pretty passable job out there too. So, yeah, I mean, look, it's been fun watching this draft class work, and of course, we'll continue to track these guys. Next week, we'll do defense, and of course, we will keep an eye on college football as we continue to track the 2025 draft class as well. Tony, anything coming up on Sportskeeda? Fans should have their eyes keep an eye on it for?
Well, we'll have that article on Kelvin Banks, which there's a lot of information in there. Kelvin Banks is still a good player, still the first round pick, but if teams are basically projecting him as a guard, it's going to hurt his draft stock. Have an article later this week as well on the defensive rookies and how they have done during the first month of the season.
All right, can't wait to see it. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmeelk. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Draft Season, brought to you by Moody's, proud partner of the New York Giants. We'll see you next time, everybody.